Lionhearts, your old pal Jordan the Lion. Welcome back. Yep, it's an early start today because at some point today I am going to drive to Michigan and stay with my brother because we are flying out to, well, Los Angeles in the morning. So that's our deal. My grandpa's gonna make the pork and sauerkraut that he makes every time I'm here. We're gonna hang out and then I'm gonna hit the road and go visit Seth. And there's something I wanna go vlog in his area. It's somebody that I've been a fan of, you know, quite a long time. One of the leading voices in punk rock. I'll save it till we get there. Daze with Jordan the Lion begins now. Look at what's going on in here. Hanging out with this papaw. Well, my grandpa didn't let me down. He knows my favorite meal, so he went ahead and made the pork, sauerkraut, and mashed potatoes for me. Said whether I like it or not. It's fantastic. And even you like it, don't you? You got a little bit of the pork. Well, guys, we are leaving Ohio. We're gonna head off to Michigan, so say goodbye to my grandpa until next time. Here he is. I guess you can come too. All right, we've made it to Michigan. I didn't film any of Ohio for our drive because it snowed ridiculously the entire time. Then when we got to Michigan, it was all done. It all completely stopped, like the moment we hit the border. So I'm gonna go drop off Jaw with my brother for a little bit and go out and do what I wanted to vlog for us today. The history of Iggy Pop and the Stooges. Some call them the founders of punk rock. All right, I've dropped off Jaw and we are headed out to our first stop where Iggy Pop was born and raised. Well, here we are, my friends. Believe it or not, this trailer park is where the great Jim Osterberg was born and raised. Yep, a man we know as Iggy Pop from the Stooges, or Iggy and the Stooges. He was born and raised here. He said that his father was a high school teacher and his mother was a private secretary, and they were lower middle class and lived in a 3-room trailer here on this site. Now, he said he would find out later in life that a lot of the people he met here were some of the best people he would ever know in his life compared to other people he would meet, but he said this is kind of where the rock and roll attitude started to develop. He said we would have a family that lived down the street from us that would asphyxiate a chicken on their car exhaust once a week to cook for dinner. He said there was a kid in the neighborhood that could play Bullfrog by Dwayne Eddy on guitar, and he said that's when I kind of started getting really into that crazy lifestyle of music and wanting to find out more. And then he said it was only a matter of time before I would start listening to Elvis Presley, Dwayne Eddy, and he said the rest was history. I just knew whatever they were doing, I had to be a part of it. Now, I looked and looked and looked and couldn't find the number for the trailer that he lived in, but I think we should go drive through and I'll just show you the neighborhood, and I'm gonna ask if I see anybody out. Maybe somebody here knows that Iggy Pop is from here, and maybe they can tell me which trailer it was. Who knows? So let's take a drive through Iggy Pop's trailer park. Well, I just ran into some gentlemen that live here and I said, you wouldn't happen to know where Iggy Pop lived, would you? And they said, yeah, we were gonna buy the place, it's right here. So this was the lot where Iggy was born and raised, and all those stories I just told you about right here, that's where they all would have happened. That's where his mom and dad and he would have lived while he was going to school. Wow, it's so interesting to know that the man who would bring us I Want to Be Your Dog, Raw Power, Lust for Life, Gimme Danger, all those songs that we would know from Iggy and the Stooges, it all started here, man. God, that's so cool. Pretty funny that the very first 2 guys that I saw outside that I stopped to talk to were working on a car, and I said, hey, you guys wouldn't happen to know where Iggy Pop lived when he was from here? And the one guy immediately looked at me and said, I can't believe it. He goes, I can't believe somebody else wants to know. He goes, yes, I do know. And he turns around and points to a trailer 2 trailers behind him, and he says, I was actually gonna buy that trailer, but it was too small. And he said I didn't want to live too close to my other relatives, but he said He said, yeah, I found that out and figured, you know, nobody will ever probably care. Nobody will ever ask me or anything. And he goes, and here you are asking. So it was in the cards for us to get to see it. Now, believe it or not, Iggy Pop was not like a troublemaker or anything growing up. He actually was a pretty good student. So I'm gonna take us over to his high school and I'm gonna tell you a little bit about his high school days. Right around the corner from where Iggy was raised is a White Castle. That's a Columbus company, and I realized I've never shown you guys a White Castle, so we're gonna pop in, get a bite to eat real quick before we go to the high school. So White Castle is basically known for their sliders, and that's what we're gonna get. And here's the original. All right, there's one, there's the original. Pretty simple, pickles, onions, goodness. And I've never had a fish one, so I decided to try fish. All right, we're on the road again. Now, coming up in front of us is the University of Michigan Stadium, and right across the street is Pioneer High School, formerly known as Ann Arbor High School. Well, here you can see where it was still Ann Arbor High School. This is where Iggy Pop, Jim Osterberg, went to high school. Now here, you wouldn't think it to look at him now and knowing his history, but when he went here, he was actually taking college prep courses. He was the vice president of his class before he got in here. And while he was here, he was also on the golf team. But it was also while he was going to school here that he ended up joining a band called the Iguanas as their drummer, because he was on the drum squad here in the high school. And that's where the name Iggy came from. People started calling him Iggy because of the Iguanas. Also, when he went here, his future bandmates, the Ashtons, Ron and Scott Ashton, went here, as well as many of you may know Bob Seger. He also went here. Now, Iggy said when he went here, this is where things started to change, because he said when he was 13, he decided he wanted to start learning drums. And he said, I also knew then that I was kind of thinking in a rock and roll mindset. I knew I couldn't be a hippie because I just wasn't cut out for that, but I wanted to do something extraordinary. He said it was actually my time here that I realized right at the end of it that I was going to do everything I had to do to break up the path that I was going on, which most of you are going, wait, what? And he said, no. He said even though he was a good student, he was involved in a lot of activities and everything, he said, I just foresaw my future being an exact continuation of high school, where I was sitting in a room watching life go by, you know, just miserable. And he said that's when I decided I was going to put everything into a band. And when he was in high school, he got a job at a local record store. It's no longer there, but we're going to go over and check out the record store. And here you can see how old this school really is. Now, when Iggy was going to school here, he would also do weekend gigs in Chicago, and he said that was the first time he ever got stoned. And he said when I got stoned, he said that was the moment when I was like, you know what, I can't be a hippie, but I can do something, and whatever I do, it has to be completely different, something nobody has ever seen. He loved blues music, but he said I couldn't do blues. I wanted to make something for the degenerate kids of America. And that's when Iggy and the Stooges started to come about. He went and talked to Scott and Ron Ashton, talked them into joining what he called Jim Osterberg's music school, and Iggy started schooling them in what would become the Stooges. And also, while Iggy went to high school, he received a full scholarship to attend University of Michigan, which he did not use. Now we're right here in the heart of Michigan campus. So right here where this sandwich shop is now used to be Discount Records, and this is where Iggy Pop worked when he was in high school. He would eventually meet the guy who would sign them to their first record deal here. He would be managed by someone he met here, and meet a lot of local musicians here. And he actually said, the basis for the Stooges, when it all kind of started coming together, was 4 things. He said it was attitude, youth, drugs, and one heck of a record collection, but he didn't say heck. And this is where he would have bought and listened to records constantly while he worked. Now let's head off to the house where the Stooges got their name. Well, here we are. This is officially known as the first Stooges house.
They lived, I believe, on the second floor, and this is where Ron, Scott, and Iggy all lived when they formed the band in 1967 over the summer. Now, Iggy told some really interesting stories about the startup of this group, and he said one of them was that when they started, they didn't really have a whole lot of money. So when Scott started they wanted to experiment with different sounds. They didn't just want to be like a normal 1960s band, you know, like psychedelic, hippie. They just said, if we're gonna separate ourselves, since we're not in Los Angeles or London or New York or whatever, we got to do something way, way different. And so he said Scott went out and bought or got a hold of some oil barrels, these oversized oil barrels, painted them white, and they found when you laid them on the ground, you could actually attach a kick drum pedal to it. It fastened right onto the lip. So they would actually use those as the kick drums. They would put some other barrels out in front, and those would be the toms, and then they would use a normal set of cymbals and normal snare drum. And Iggy said, as we would work on these kind of things and kind of experiment, he goes, I'd find myself doing all kinds of weird experimenting. And he said, like, one of them was that, he said, I'd be like walking around the house vacuuming, and all of a sudden I'd hear some weird, like, riff in my head, and I'd start like putting my thumb over top of the vacuum and getting weird sounds out of that. And then he goes, and then eventually when I got some money, I went pro and got an air compressor and started doing the same things. But he said this is when they would start hatching these crazy ideas. He said they would stay up all night, and that's where the name came from. They were watching a Three Stooges marathon, and he said we would stay up, and he said Ron and Scott were both like really crazy dudes, and they loved great music. So he said they would have all these weird ideas while they were stoned that they would run past me, and we go, okay, we can try that. And so he said once we got out and started performing and we would get out on that stage, he said I would just let the music take over. And he said Scott was basically like a blues drummer, and Ron was basically like, he had kind of a swinging guitar style. It wasn't this up and down strumming pattern that you might know out of most punk bands, but he said that's what gave them a different sound. He said it was almost bluesy, but not bluesy, because it was just so punk. And he goes, before there was punk. So Iggy said that he said this would be kind of where they would mastermind the whole plot for what they were going to do and how they were going to separate themselves from others. And he said once we would get out on the stage to perform, he said I just let the music take over. And he said I would almost feel possessed by the music. And he said to where I was holding that microphone so tight, just waiting for it to explode in my hands. And he also said that he said when we played shows, anything could go. He said we would be out playing, and if somebody held up a jar of peanut butter like they did in Crosley Field, he would just grab the peanut butter and just start smearing it all over himself. And Iggy was known for, like, they were known for the crazy costumes, because they would do anything to create a show. And I even read one quote where they said watching Iggy pop in the late 60s and early 70s, he had so much energy moving across the stage that he would have put Mick Jagger to shame. So this is actually where they named themselves the Stooges. And I saw an interview that he did with Thurston Moore, and Thurston Moore's like, that was such a confusing name, because he goes, I go into like a dime store, you know, and go to their like discount rack, and there I find the Stooges, and he goes, I'm expecting these guys to be funny or to like look like the Three Stooges, and like you guys are all so serious on the cover and everything. He said it was just like you didn't know what to expect, and then you put the record on and it was like boom, something completely different. Now they moved out of here after that year, and they went to another house that they called Stooge Manor. So we're gonna head over there now. Now after the band moved out of the last house, they moved into what was called the Fun House. And the Fun House is unfortunately no longer here. However, we can see where it was. Now this was a pretty big deal because, well, for one thing, the band almost wasn't ever gonna play out. They liked making music, but they were afraid to perform. And Iggy said what actually changed their minds, what got them performing, was seeing the Doors play the homecoming dance at University of Michigan. So it was on this site right here. There used to be a two-story house, and what they said was that Iggy, all the band members, all their roadies, the roadies' kids, their family, all of them, they all lived on this property, and Iggy and his wife also lived there. They said it was a really, really crowded house, but they said even though Iggy and his wife would have a short union, Iggy would start dating Nico, if you know remember Nico. And she actually filmed one of her music videos in the cornfields behind this property. And she used to live here for a short time with Iggy when they were dating. Now from a side view, you can tell that there are now houses and a whole housing community back here, but before that, that's where that cornfield would have been. And they recorded, well, they didn't record, they filmed Nico's music video for Evening of Light back there. And this would have also been the time that the Ashton brothers and their bass player Dave would get into a car accident. They were actually going under the Washington Street Bridge, and the van that they were driving couldn't clear it, and it actually put all three in the hospital and like pretty much ripped the roof off of the van. Now Funhouse was it's weird because Funhouse is now kind of critically acclaimed, but when it came out, it was like no big deal. It was produced by Elektra because Elektra Records actually came here to sign the MC5. And when they came to sign the MC5, they did for $20,000. They also picked up the Stooges for $5,000. And the first record didn't do so well, the self-titled Stooges record. And then they did Funhouse, and when they originally recorded it, they recorded it, you know, like in a nice plush studio, and when they got done, the band hated it. Iggy said, you know, that doesn't sound like us. He demanded that they basically re-record it all, strip all the stuff out of the studio, and Iggy went to record it with a handheld microphone and get that raw sound, kind of like the live sound that they were known for. And they did that, and they planned on having Loose as their single, but apparently Elektra decided not to, and they chose, was it Down on the Street? And the band had recorded a version of that, and then the producer actually pulled that version out, put like some Doors type organs on it, and that was the version that they released as a single. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't a hit, and the band broke up, but in a short time thereafter, like within a year, Iggy would reform with new members, and that would be the Raw Power album. And then they would that group would break up shortly after that. He would get some more members, and that's pretty much the story. That's just how the Stooges would continue in their entire legacy. They would have people like Mike Watt in the band. They would just have like, God, I want to say like 20 to 30 members over the span of their career. I personally love Funhouse. I mean, it has some of their most classic songs. It has Dirt, LA Blues, TVI, Down on the Street. And one of the things that I found interesting when I was researching was that Iggy said that was the album I was trying the most to sound like Howlin' Wolf, or as close to Howlin' Wolf as I could sound. Pretty cool. And unfortunately, the Funhouse is gone. And that was our last sight for today's Iggy and the Stooges early career. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Go out and give some Stooges a listen. I can personally vouch for Raw Power. I think Funhouse is awesome also. Well, I'm back, buddy. Did you miss me? Let's go outside and play. What do you say? Go ahead and have fun, big man. Go roam. Enjoy the grass. There he is! Well, anime lady on the wall, I think we're about done for today. Let's thank Carrie LeBlanc before we sign off. Thank you, Carrie LeBlanc, for becoming a newest Patreon. Well, my friends, I am going to call it a night. It has been a long day of driving and vlogging, but it was totally worth it. I love Iggy Pop, and, you know, like I said, he's considered like the godfather of punk music. He's also credited as being the first man to stage dive. A couple of times he did that, and in fact, one of them they have footage of when he played in Crosley Field for like a Cincinnati music festival, and he said, I just stepped out into the crowd and just kept walking. He said, I felt like Jesus. And that was the night that it was actually Stiv Bader from the Dead Boys who was out in the crowd and held up a jar of peanut butter
Iggy grabbed the jar of peanut butter, grabbed a big chunk and started smearing it all over him, throwing it out in the crowd. But he also was known for like going as crazy as like breaking bottles and just like scraping them across his chest and everything. He was an intense performer, always has been, and he's still going strong to this day. So check out Iggy Pop. I hope you guys enjoyed all the locations we went to today. And come back tomorrow because we have a big, super special vlog tomorrow. Something I have wanted to see my whole life. Way before vlogging was ever even a thought, and we're gonna do it tomorrow. Have a great night and goodbye.